Hey 4xe fans, I tried to go live on Saturday and talk about a lot of this information, and my live got messed up. Those who were able to be with it when it was live were able to see it, but I got a phone call that interrupted it, and it never would like release or upload or whatever. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this. I got this recall letter, and a lot of people have gotten these, and this is for the 95B recall. There are two other recalls. Well, there's been more than that, but there's two other big ones related to this. There was the B9A and the 04B. We'll talk a little bit about all that, but I wanted to read this line that's at the top of this letter that caught me off guard. I did not know this was going to be the language that was going to be on this letter. And it says that owners of vehicles previously notified of the B9A recall, that's NHTSA 23V-787, will need to bring their vehicle in for recall completion, regardless of having the B9A repair performed. So first of all, if your Jeep is on the B9A recall list and you have not had that done yet, pick up the phone and schedule that. If your Jeep is on the list to have the 04B recall done, pick up the phone and schedule that. Here's why those recalls are important. They include a lot of updates that will allow the system to communicate better. And by what I mean by communicate better, if before B9A and before 04B, which by the way, if you have come to understand that the 04B was just a defrost recall, that's bad information on Jeep's part, because there's actually a lot of software updates in 04B that are the exact same updates that are on the B9A recall. It got disseminated as a defrost recall, and people didn't know that there was a lot of important information about the updates that are going in on the Jeep while it's in there for the 04B defrost recall. And those updates make it to where if there is an issue with the battery and the battery management senses it, it's able to communicate that there's an issue going on. Without those updates, you could be having irregular voltage in your hybrid battery, and that can lead to a thermal runaway situation, which can lead to off-gassing, which can lead to a fire. So I've tried my best to be a voice trying to get people to understand that those recalls are important. B9A especially, if yours is on the B9A, oh my gosh. I know of two fires that happened, two Jeeps, where the Jeeps were not on the B9A recall list, but they were on the 04B list. And they were putting it off because they're like, I'll get that done when I go and get my oil changed next time, because it's no big deal. It's a defrost recall. And I've talked to two people whose Jeeps have burned as a result of that. Now, my concern is that had they had that update, the possibility that their vehicle could have thrown a code that would have let them know that the Jeep was having issues might have avoided a fire. Now, I don't know that for sure. That's purely speculation on my part. But just understanding what I understand about these updates, and I communicate with other people that geek out on the 4xe like I do, and we've all reached the same conclusions on this, that there are some issues out there. We saw this summer a whole slew of Jeeps that were having battery degradation issues, where we were losing range and losing performance. Mine was doing that, and it eventually threw a code, and it was a P0BBD code, which is an irregular voltage code. That means the series parallel circuits of batteries that we have in the cell back in the big battery back here, all those batteries are in a series parallel arrangement, and the battery management was finding it impossible to regulate the voltages between cells. That's where you get into situations where you can have some hero cells taken off and compensating for the weaker cells. Their voltages go high, the weaker cells go low, and the battery management can't keep up with it. That can lead to a thermal runaway, that can lead to off-gassing, that can lead to fire. This is the importance of getting these updates done. And I gotta say, I was I was disappointed and surprised to see that language, that this is like a B9A 2.0 kind of thing, and that the issues apparently weren't resolved. And apparently Jeep knew this, and that's why these recalls are being issued. And in fact, I got a new battery, but I'm still on the recall list because the battery I got was made in the time frame that they have identified are problem batteries. And it has to do with the separators, and I won't go geeking out on you what separators are in batteries, but it has something to do with those not doing their job of keeping things separated. That's what they do. So that's what leads to, I don't know if it's potential shorts or just induction. I don't know what is leading to it, but a lot of us were seeing these issues, and we were losing range and having all sorts of weird issues with our batteries, and that's still going on in the 4xe. So what I wanted to talk about is the importance of get your recalls done. Some people are blowing off 04B and B9A now because of 95B. The problem with that is if your battery is having issues. We just had a conversation with a lady in the 4xe fans group. She said she made a comment that she wasn't really bothered by the issue of not charging her 4xe because she was only getting like 10 miles of range anyway, and then it wasn't really charging that much. And a few of us that understood what was going on said, you need to go get your Jeep checked out. She had not had the B9A or the 04B recall. I don't even know if she was on the B9A list, but she was on the 04B recall list. And as her Jeep stands right now, I bet she is having irregular voltage issues and doesn't even know it because it's not throwing a check engine light. Talked to somebody else who said, yeah, I've been driving around with the check engine light on, and I only get like 10 miles worth of range, but my dealership tells me there's no fix for it. And I'm going, you have a check engine light, and what code is it throwing? This, you could be in a fire scenario and not know it, not know that that's happening, but her dealership's telling her there's no fix for it, when in fact, if they pulled the code and pulled the TSB that Jeep has issued on that, they would find that if she's pulling, there's 2 or 3 codes that if she is pulling those codes, she has to get a new battery installed. And unfortunately, not all Jeep dealerships are following the TSBs associated with this. And unfortunately, they're not all following what needs to happen when a Jeep has these issues. And so what I would finish this video by saying is, if you're on the B9A or 04B, please get those scheduled. If you are on the 95B, well, if you're on the B9A list and you've been on the B9A list since, like, when did that come out? Was that late last year or early this year? You're not supposed to be charging or parking in a garage all of this time. You know, for this past year, you shouldn't have been plugging it in. You shouldn't have been parking it inside. So if you're on the B9A list, you're already in a no park, no charge scenario. And I know there's a lot of people who are just like, forget it, I'll just plug it in and charge anyway. But you should be getting that scheduled. If you're on the 04B, get that scheduled. If you get a check engine light, if you've had those updates and you get a check engine light, let me tell you, there are so many things in the 4xe that can throw a check engine light. They can be minor. A lot of them can be major. I think there's something to be said for, you know, and I don't know what it takes. I don't know what the requirements are from the manufacturers, you know, as far as like giving more information from the dash. I mean, I've wished since the start, throw a check engine light, that's great. I want to know what that is without having to buy my own OBD reader and plugging it in and downloading JScan and all that kind of stuff. I do wish manufacturers did something more to let you know what the issue is. But you could have a failed coolant pump. You could have a failed electric coolant heater. You could have a battery that's in the process of failing. You can have all sorts of things that are pretty big deals. And just because you haven't had a fire yet doesn't mean it's not a big deal and not a potential for that. There are a lot of people in the 4xe community that are like, you know, screw it, I'm going to plug in and charge anyway. I don't care what they say. Well, first of all, I would not announce that on social media if I were those people. I don't know what liabilities we assume by making those statements. Like if Jeep tells me to not plug it in and not park it in my garage, and being who I am, Jeep knows that I know that they know that I know that I know about this and that I'm not supposed to be doing that. If I did that anyway and had a garage fire, one, I don't know what that liability I'm assuming, and I don't know what my insurance company would have to say if I burned down part of my house. Would they deny my claim based on me knowing, having that knowledge and charging anyway? I don't know. And I know there haven't been that very many fires. There have been 13 incidents, at least in the report. Now, I have to believe there have been more incidents than what are in the report, just based on the people that I've talked to and the conversations I've had. But of those 13 incidents, I think some of those are off-gassing scenarios as opposed to an actual fire scenario, which off-gassing can, you know, be a predecessor of a fire happening. But so they're all bad. I mean, all 13 of them are issues, but to my knowledge, there have only been 8 or 9 fires, but I have a feeling there's been more than that, just based on the number of conversations I've had with people who, you know, firsthand have had fires. So I don't know. I don't know if I totally trust their numbers in that. And a lot of people like to lean on what Jeep is saying, that only 5% of the batteries are going to be problematic in this 95B recall. Well, 95B is B9A 2.0. So B9A, they told us less than 1% of the batteries that were in recalled Jeeps would have the issue. We proved those numbers incorrect way early on in the recall in the 4xe fans group. We took a poll and found that our numbers were way more than 1%. So I shouldn't say trust, I don't know what number, I don't put a lot of credence into their speculative percentages. And I also question, there were a lot of people that had their Jeeps, had their batteries replaced later, after the B9A and after the 04B recall. There were a lot of people that had issues months later and had to have the batteries replaced. I was one of those. I was part of B9A in the beginning, and my Jeep was removed, which I never could figure out why. I was part of 04B, had that update done, and then several months later, had a check engine light, had a P0 BBD code, got a new battery. Now, if I got a new battery, why am I back on the 95B recall list? That's because along with 95B, Jeep issued a 96B recall to get all of the batteries that they think were bad out of the supply chain and returned back. And unfortunately, 96B didn't get issued soon enough, and I ended up with one of those batteries that was manufactured in that time window. And so I'm back on the recall list. Now, it's not that my battery during the 95B season, it wasn't bad right then. It wasn't bad right at the time when I had 04B, but it went bad later. And I question, is Jeep going back and saying, hey, anybody who's had their batteries replaced, that is now part of the 95B recall? Are they crediting the 95B with all of those batteries that have been replaced? Or are they just on a different line item on a spreadsheet? And if so, that's where we question how Jeep comes up with these percentages. And we've already shown the math that there are more than what Jeep says. So I wouldn't count on that 5%. I also would say this. There are people that say, well, I've been charging for 3 years and my Jeep's been fine. Well, I would say this. Every single one that has burned has been fine right up until the fire. It was fine right up until it wasn't. There's no light on this dash that says, hey, owner, at 6:30 p.m. tonight, I'm going to go up in flames, so park me outside. It's not going to warn you especially if you haven't had the B9A and 04B updates that allow the system to communicate and throw a check engine light if it perceives an issue in the battery ahead of time. So a lot of information, and I'm sorry to throw up all over you with all this stuff. It's just, I have questions, I have concerns, but mainly I have concerns for the people of the 4xe community who are putting off doing some of these recalls, especially those who have miscommunicated what has happened. Some people have gone in and had the 04B recall, and it caused a check engine light. And then they've gone into the forums and the 4xe groups and said, hey, don't get the 04B because it caused an issue. Well, it didn't cause an issue. It allowed the system to communicate an issue that was already there. So if you're putting it off because you've heard these recalls cause issues, that is not the case. What is happening is there were already issues there that the system had the inability to communicate, and getting the updates proved themselves to be beneficial by throwing a check engine light while it's still sitting at the dealership or on the drive home and letting you know you've got an issue in your battery. So some of the things to look for if you have not had the B9A 04B recalls, watch how much range you're getting. I don't mean what's on the dash. I don't mean the guessometer that tells you how much range it thinks you're going to get. I'm talking if you go out and drive, are you getting the range that that thing is estimating? So let's say it's estimating 23 miles. Are you getting 12 miles instead of 23? Or if it says 23, are you getting 18 instead of 23? Are you seeing a loss of range? Are you seeing a loss of performance? Are you seeing the Jeep start the engine in places where it hasn't in the past? Say you're driving down the road and you've got a little bit of an incline that goes for like 50 yards. Is the Jeep all of a sudden starting where it didn't do that a year ago? If the answer is yes to that, you've got some sort of degradation issue that's going on that seems to be somewhat related to the separators or whatever is going on in the design of these batteries. And if you do not have your own OBD reader, this is a Bluetooth thing. I mean, I think this thing's like 45 bucks on Amazon. I can put a link in the comments if I remember to do that. And you know, I think JScan's like another $15 or something, but you can go in there and look at your state of health. And I've got some other videos on my channel that show, I mean, I'm no JScan expert, so don't ask me for advice, but I've learned from other people. And if you are seeing that happen, you need to see what your state of health is. It's called SOH, state of health. And if it's in the upper 80s, that's not good. These batteries should not be degrading at that rate that quickly. And mine ended up around 78.4%, I think, when it finally flew through the code, the P0BBD code, indicating that there was an irregular voltage, that this battery's breaking down on the inside, and it's going to be an issue. So just wanted to share all that because I tried to share all that with that live, and the people who were there got to see that, and I felt like there was some good information to share, and just couldn't get that video to release. But final thing, I know I think I said that a little bit ago. Final thing about this, if you have not received notification, check nhtsa.gov or mopar.com. You can check the Jeep app as well, but we have found the Jeep app to be a little lagging for some reason. You might have to restart it to get it to update with the most current information. If you are not on the NHTSA website as far as having a recall, or the mopar.com website as far as having a recall, you're not on the recall, and you can just continue to operate like you normally do. But if you and you may be on one of those lists and not get the letter, you may get the letter. If you get the letter, you're definitely on one of the websites. But it may be a thing where maybe Jeep just doesn't have your current address. I mean, there could be all sorts of reasons why a letter doesn't make it to you. But I think we need to take this serious. I don't think we need to panic. I think we need to take it seriously and do what Jeep tells us. Don't plug it in, and don't park it inside. I know it's a pain. Let me tell you, it's a pain, and it is getting aggravating to have to go through this. But it's kind of understandable why Jeep is trying to remedy this situation. You know, some people are saying, well, why don't they just replace all the batteries and all the 4xEs on the road? That I have to say, that may be an eventuality, but a couple of us have run what we think are speculative numbers on what it would really cost And independently of each other, a couple of us came up with between 600 million and 800 million just to replace all those batteries. Dollars, that's what I'm getting at. I didn't give a unit on that, but between $600 million and $800 million, and I don't know how realistic that is. I think our numbers could be conservative. So getting close to the $1 billion mark, I don't know. I have no idea, but some of us are just doing some speculative numbers separately, came up with those numbers. So you can see why, especially given the state of Stellantis in the United States with the Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram lines, how everything's just rough right now. You could see why nobody at Jeep wants to go, hey, Mr. Shareholder, we're going to throw another $600 million at these and not make a dime off of that. So you can see why that's problematic for Jeep and Stellantis both, to not want to replace these batteries if they don't have to. However, I will say this. Jeep and Stellantis cannot put the bottom line ahead of safety. Safety needs to be the bottom line. And if they are putting off the inevitable, I think somebody should have a hard time sleeping at night if that's the decision they're making. That if they are not being transparent with us about the realities of this, and they're not being willing to go and do the right thing, then that's problematic too. So I'll just leave it at that. So thanks for watching. Watch your mailboxes for the letter. These started going out on the 17th. Now, when they say they started going out on the 17th, I'm sure they can't mail all 100 and some odd thousand letters all in the same day. And I don't know how long that takes for our Canadian friends and our European friends. They're usually going to be behind us for a while, for a few weeks to a few months. So I don't think they've even started receiving their notifications of this issue. So, boy, it's a mess. And that's why it took so long to get through all this information. Thanks for watching. Take care.